Section 17 of The Modern Scottish Minstrel. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Chairlie. The Modern Scottish Minstrel by Charles Rogers. Section 17. Metrical translations from the Modern Gaelic Minstrelsy. Robert Mackay, Rob Down. Robert Mackay, called Down for the colour of his hair, which was brown or chestnut, was born in the Strathmore of Sutherlandshire, about the year 1714. His calling, with the interval of a brief military service in the Fencibles, was the tending of cattle, in the several gradations of herd, drover, and bowman, or responsible cowkeeper, the last, in his pastoral country, a charge of trust and respectability. At one period he had an appointment in Lord Reay's forest, but some deviations into the righteous theft, so the Highlanders of those parts, it seems, call the appropriation of an occasional deer to their own use, forfeited his noble employer's confidence. Rob, however, does not appear to have suffered in his general character or reputation for an unconsidered trifle like this, nor otherwise to have declined in the favour of his chief, beyond the necessity of transporting himself to a situation somewhat nearer the verge of Cape Wrath than the bosom of the deer preserve. Mackay was happily married, and brought up a large family in habits and sentiments of piety, a fact which his reverend biographer connects very touchingly with the stated solemnities of the Saturday night, when the lighter chants of the week were exchanged at the worthy drover's fireside for the purer and holier melodies of another inspiration. As a pendant to this creditable account of the Bard's principles, we are informed that he was a frequent guest at the presbytery dinner table, a circumstance which some may be so malicious as to surmise amounted to nothing more than a purpose to enhance the festive recreations of the reverend body, a suspicion, we believe, in this particular instance totally unfounded. He died in 1778, and he has succeeded to some rather peculiar honours for a person in his position, or even of his mark. He has had a reverend doctor for his editorial biographer, and no less than Sir Walter Scott for his reviewer. The pages which Sir Walter has culled from some literal translations that were submitted to him are certainly the most favourable specimens of the bard that we have been able to discover in his volume. The rest are generally either satiric rants too rough or too local for transfusion, or panegyrics of the living and the dead, in the usual extravagant style of such compositions, according to the taste of the Highlanders and the usage of their bards; or they are love lays, of which the language is more copious and diversified than the sentiment. In the gleanings on which we have ventured, after the illustrious person who has done so much honour to the bard by his comments and selections, we have attempted to draw out a little more of the peculiar character of the poet's genius. The Song of Winter. This is selected as a specimen of Mackay's descriptive poetry. It is in a style peculiar to the Highlands, where description runs so entirely into epithets and adjectives as to render recitation breathless and translation hopeless. Here, while we have retained the imagery, we have been unable to find room, or rather rhyme, for one half of the epithets in the original. The power of alliterative harmony in the original song is extraordinary. At waking so early was snow on the ben, and the glen of the hill in the storm drift so chilling, the linnet was stilling that couched in its den, and the poor robin was shrilling in sorrow his strain. Every grove was expecting its leaf shed in gloom, the sap it is draining, down rootwards 'tis straining, and the bark it is waning as dry as the tomb, and the blackbird at morning is shrieking his doom. Ceases thriving the knotted, the stunted birk shaw, while the rough wind is blowing, and the drift of the snowing is shaking o'erthrowing the copse on the law. 'Tis the season when nature is all in the sear, when her snow showers are hailing, her rain sleet assailing, her mountain winds wailing, her rime frosts severe. 'Tis the season of leanness, unkindness, and chill, its whistle is ringing, an iciness bringing, where the brown leaves are clinging in helplessness still, and the snow rush is delving with furrows the hill. The sun is in hiding, or frozen its beam, on the peaks where he lingers, on the glens where the singers, with their bills and small fingers, are raking the stream, or picking the midstead for forage and scream. When darkness the gloaming, oh, scant is their cheer, all benumbed is their song in the hedge they are thronging, and for shelter still longing, the mortar they tear, ever noisily, noisily, squealing their care. The running stream's chieftain is trailing to land, so flabby, so grimy, so sickly, so slimy, the spots of his prime he has rusted with sand, crook snouted his crest is, that tapered so grand. How mournful in winter the lowing of kine, how lean back'd they shiver, how draggled their cover, how their nostrils run over with drippings of brine, so scraggy and crining, in the cold frost they pine. 'Tis Hallowmas time, and to mildness farewell, its bristles are lowering with darkness o'erpowering, are its waters aye showering with onset so fell, seem the kid and the yearling as rung their death knell. Every outlying creature, how sinewed soe'er, seeks the refuge of shelter, the race of the antler, they snort and they falter, are cold in their lair, and the fawns they are wasting since their kin is afar. Such songs that are saddest and dreariest of all, I ever am eerie in the morning to hear ye, when foddering to cheer the poor herd in the stall, while each creature is moaning and sickening in thrall. Dirge for Ian Mackechan, a fragment. Mackay was entertained by Mackechan, who was a respectable store farmer, from his earliest life to his marriage. According to his reverend biographer, the last lines of the elegy, of which the following is a translation, were much approved. I see the wretch of high degree, though poetry has struck his race, pass with a darkness on his face that door of hospitality. I see the widow in her tears, dark as her woe I see her boy, from both want reaves the dregs of joy, the flash of youth through rags appears. I see the poor's, the minstrel's lot, as brethren they, no boon for song, I see the unrequited wrong call for its helper who is not. You hear my plaint and ask me why, you ask me when this deep distress began to rage without redress, with Ian Mackechan's dying sigh. Song of the Forsaken Drover. During a long absence on a droving expedition, Mackay was deprived of his mistress by another lover, whom, in fine, she married. The discovery he made on his return led to this composition, which is a sequel to another composed on his distant journey, in which he seems to prognosticate something like what happened. Both are selected by Sir Walter Scott as specimens of the bard, and may be found paraphrastically rendered in a prose version in the Quarterly Review, volume 45, page 371, and in the notes to the last edition of The Highland Drover, in Chronicles of the Canongate. With regard to the present specimen, it may be remarked that part of the original is either so obscure or so freely rendered by Sir Walter Scott's translator, that we have attempted the present version, not without some little perplexity as to the sense of one or two allusions. We claim, on the whole, the merit of almost literal fidelity. I fly from the fold, since my passions despair, no longer must harbour the charms that are there. Anne's slender eyebrows, her sleek tresses so long, her turreted bosom, and Isabel's song. What has been, and is not, woe's my thought, it must not be spoken, nor can be forgot. I wander'd the fold, and I rambled the grove, and each spot it reported the kiss of my love, but I saw her caressing another, and feel 'tis distraction to hear them, and to see them so leal. What has been and is not, woe's my thought, it must not be spoken, nor can be forgot. Since 'twas told that a rival beguiled thee away, the dreams of my love are the dreams of dismay. Though unsummoned of thee, love has captured thy thrall, and my hope of redemption for ever is small. Day and night, though I strive aye to shake him away, still he clings like the ivy. But auburn haired Anna, to tell thee my plight, 'tis old love unrequited that prostrates my might. In presence or absence, I faithful, my smart still racks and still searches and tugs at my heart. Broken that heart, yet why disappear from my country without one embrace from my dear? She answers with laughter and haughty disdain, to handle my snood you petition in vain. 6 suitors are mine since the year thou wert gone. What art thou, that thou shouldst be the favourite one? Art thou sick? Ha, ha, for thy woe! Art thou dying of love? Troth, love's payment was slow. Though my anger may feign it requites thy disdain, and vaunts in thy absence, it threatens in vain. All in vain, for thy image in fondness returns, and o'er thy sweet likeness expectancy burns. And I hope, yes, I hope once more, till my hope waxes high as a tower in its soar. Isabel Mackay, The Maid Alone, to a pibroch tune. This is one of those lyrics, of which there are many in Gaelic poetry, that are intended to imitate pipe music. They consist of 3 parts, called Urlur, Siúl, and Crunlua. The first is a slow, monotonous measure, usually indeed a mere repetition of the same words or tones; the second, a livelier or brisker melody, striking into description or narrative; the third, a rapid finale, taxing the reciter's or performer's powers to their utmost pitch of expedition. The heroine of the song is the same Isabel who is introduced towards the commencement of The Forsaken Drover, and it appears from other verses in Mackay's collection that it was not her fate to be alone through life. It is to be understood that when the verses were composed, she was in charge of her father's extensive pastoral manège, and not a mere milkmaid or dairywoman. Urlur. Isabel Mackay is with the milk kye, and Isabel Mackay is alone. Isabel Mackay is with the milk kye, and Isabel Mackay is alone. Seest thou Isabel Mackay with the milk kye, at the forest foot and alone? Siúl. By the Virgin and the Sun, thou bride lacking one, if ever thy time is coming, begone. The occasion is prime, for Isabel Mackay is with the milk kye at the skirts of the forest, and with her is none, by the Virgin and Sun. Woe is the sign, it is not well, with the lads that dwell around us so brave, when the mistress fine of Riohan a Dave is out with the kine, and with her is none. Oh, woe is the sign. Whoever he be that a bride would gain, of gentle degree, and a drove or twain, his speed let him strain to Riohan a Dave, and a bride he shall have, then to her so fain, whoever he be that a bride would gain. And a bride he shall have, the maid that's alone, Isabel Mackay. Oh, cease not the dearie, so fit for embracing, her patience distressing, the bestial a chasing, and she alone. 'Tis a marvellous fashion, that men should be slack, when their bosoms lack an object of passion. To look such a lass on, her patience distressing, the bestial a chasing in the field alone. Crunlua, finale. Oh, look upon the prize, sirs, that where yon heights are rising, the whole long 12-month sighs in because she is alone. Go learn it from my minstrelsy, who lists the tale to carry. The maiden shuts the public eye, and is ordained to tarry. Mid stoops and cans and milking ware, where brown hills rear their ridges bare, and wails her plight the livelong year to spend the day alone. Evan's Elegy. Mackay was benighted on a deer-stalking expedition near a wild hut or shieling at the head of Loch Eriboll. Here he found its only inmate, a poor asthmatic old man, stretched on his pallet, apparently at the point of death. As he sat by his bedside, he crooned, so as to be audible, it seems, to the patient, the following elegiac ditty, in which, it will be observed, he alludes to the death, then recent, of Pelham, an eminent statesman of George II's reign. As he was finishing his ditty, the old man's feelings were moved in a way which will be found in the appended note. This is one of Sir Walter Scott's extracts in the Quarterly, and is now attempted in the measure of the original. How often, Death, art waking the imploring cry of nature, when she sees her phalanx breaking, and thou'dst have all, grim feature, since autumn's leaves to brownness of deeper shade were tending. We saw thy step from palaces to Evan's nook descending. O long, long thine agony, a nameless length its tide, since breathless thou hast painted here, and not a friend beside. Thine errors what I judge not, what righteous deeds undone, but if remains a sudden night, redeem it, dying one. O marked we, Death, thy teachings true, what dust of time would blind? Such thy impartiality to our highest, lowest kind. Thy look is upwards, downwards shot, determined none to miss. It rose to Pelham's princely bower, it sinks to shed like this. O long, long thine agony, a nameless length its tide, since breathless thou hast panted here, and not a friend beside. So great thy victims, that the noble stand humbled by the bier, so poor it shames the poorest, to grace them with a tear. Between the minister of state and him that grovels there, should one remain uncounselled, is there one whom dule shall spare? O long, long thine agony, a nameless length its tide, since breathless thou hast panted here, and not a friend beside. The hail that strews the battlefield, not louder sounds its call than the falling thousands round us are voicing words to all. Hearken, least of all the nameless, Evan's hour is going fast. Hearken, greatest of earth's great ones, princely Pelham's hour is past. O long, long thine agony, a nameless length its tide, since breathless thou hast panted here, and not a friend beside. Friends of my heart, in the twain we see a type of life's declining. 'Tis like the lantern's dripping light at either end adwining. Where was there one more low than thou, thou least of meanest things? And where than his was higher place, except the throne of kings? O long, long thine agony, a nameless length its tide, since breathless thou hast panted here, and not a friend beside. Thine errors what, I judge not, what righteous deeds undone, but if remains a sudden night, redeem it, dying one. Dougal Buchanan. Dougal Buchanan was born at the mill of Ardagh, in the beautiful valley Strathire, and parish of Balquhidder, in the year 1716. His parents were in circumstances to allow him the education of the parish school, on which, by private application, he so far improved as to be qualified to act as teacher and catechist to the Highland locality which borders on Loch Rannoch, under the appointment of the Society for Propagating Christian Knowledge. Never, it is believed, were the duties of a calling discharged with more zeal and efficiency. The catechist was, both in and out of the strict department of his office, a universal oracle, and his name is revered in the scene of his usefulness in a degree to which the honours of canonisation could scarcely have added. Pious to the height of a proverbial model, he was withal frank, cheerful, and social, and from his extraordinary command of the Gaelic idiom and its poetic phraseology, he must have lent an ear to many a song and many a legend, a nourishment of the imagination in which, as well as in purity of Gaelic, his native Balquhidder was immeasurably inferior to the Rannoch district of his adoption. The composition of hymns, embracing a most eloquent and musical paraphrase of many of the more striking inspirations of scriptural poetry, seems to have been the favourite employment of his leisure hours. These are sung or recited in every cottage of the Highlands where a reader or a retentive memory is to be found. Buchanan's life was short. He was cut off by typhus fever, at a period when his talents had begun to attract a more than local attention. It was within a year after his return from superintending the press of the first version of the Gaelic New Testament that his lamented death took place. His command of his native tongue is understood to have been serviceable to the translator, the Reverend James Stewart of Killin, who had probably been Buchanan's early acquaintance, as they were natives of the same district. This reverend gentleman is said to have entertained a scheme of getting the catechist regularly licensed to preach the gospel without the usual academical preparation. The scheme was frustrated by his death in the summer of 1768. We know of no fact relating to the development of the poetic vein of this interesting bard, unless it be found in the circumstance to which he refers in his diary, of having been bred a violent Jacobite, and having lived many years under the excitement of strong, even vindictive feelings, at the fate of his chief and landlord, Buchanan of Arnprior and Strathire, who, with many of his dependants, and some of the poet's relations, suffered death for their share in the last rebellion. While he relates that the power of religion at length quenched this effervescence of his emotions, it may be supposed that ardent Jacobitism, with its common accompaniment of melody, may have fostered an imagination which every circumstance proves to have been sufficiently susceptible. It may be added, as a particular not unworthy of memorial in a poet's life, that his remains are deposited in perhaps the most picturesque place of sepulture in the kingdom, the peninsula of Little Lenny, in the neighbourhood of Callander, to which his relatives transferred his body, as the sepulchre of many chiefs and considerable persons of his clan, and where it is perhaps matter of surprise that his Highland countrymen have never thought of honouring his memory with some kind of monument. The poetic remains of Dougal Buchanan do not afford extensive materials for translation. The subjects with which he deals are too solemn, and their treatment too surcharged with scriptural imagery, to be available for the purposes of popular collection, of which the object is not directly religious. The only exception that occurs, perhaps, is his poem on the Skull. Even in this case some moral pictures have been omitted, as either too coarsely or too solemnly touched to be fit for our purpose. A few lines of the conclusion are also omitted, as being mere amplifications of Scripture, wonderful, indeed, in point of vernacular beauty or sublimity, but not fusible for other use. Slight traces of imitation may be perceived, the grave of Blair and some passages of Hamlet being the apparent models. End of section 17. Recording by Chairlie, BC, Canada. Section 18 of the Modern Scottish Minstrel. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Modern Scottish Minstrel by Charles Rogers, Section 18. A Clachan, the Skull. As I sat by the grave, at the brink of its cave, lo, a featureless skull on the ground, the symbol I clasp, and detain in my grasp, while I turn it around and around. Without beauty or grace, or a glance to express, of the bystander nigh, a thought, its jaw and its mouth are tenantless both, nor passes emotion its throat. No glow on its face, no ringlets to grace its brow, no ear for my song. Hushed the caves of its breath, and the finger of death the raised features hath flattened along. The eye's wonted beam, and the eyelid's quick gleam, the intelligent sight are no more, but the worms of the soil as they wriggle and coil, come hither their dwellings to bore. No lineament here is left to declare if monarch or chief art thou, Alexander the Brave, as the portionless slave that on dunghill expires, is as low. Thou delver of death, in my ear let thy breath, who tenants my hand, unfold, that my voice may not die without a reply, though the ear it addresses is cold. Say, wert thou a May, of beauty a ray, and flattered thine eye with a smile? Thy meshes didst set, like the links of a net, the hearts of the youth to wile. Alas, every charm that a bosom could warm is changed to the grain of disgust. O fie on the spoiler for daring to soil her gracefulness all in the dust. Say, wise in the law, did the people with awe acknowledge thy rule o'er them? The magistrate true, to all dealing their due, and just to redress or condemn? Or was righteousness sold for handfuls of gold, in the scales of thy partial decree, while the poor were unheard when their suit they preferred, and appealed their distresses to thee? Say, once in thine hour was thy medicine of power to extinguish the fever of ale, and seemed, as the pride of thy leechcraft e'en tried, o'er omnipotent death to prevail. Alas, that thine aid should have ever betrayed thy hope when the need was thine own! What salve or annealing sufficed for thy healing, when the hours of thy portion were flown? Or wert thou a hero, a leader to glory, while armies thy truncheon obeyed, to victory cheering, as thy foemen careering in flight left their mountains of dead? Was thy valiancy laid, or unhilted thy blade, when came onwards in battle array the sepulchre swarms, unsheathed in their arms, to sack and to rifle their prey? How they joy in their spoil, as thy body the while, besieging, the reptile is vain, and her beetle mate blind hums his gladness to find his defence in the lodge of thy brain. Some dig where the sheen of the ivory has been, some the organ where music repaired. In rabble and rout they come in and come out at the gashes their fangs have bared. Do I hold in my hand a whole lordship of land, represented by nakedness here? Perhaps not unkind to the helpless thy mind, nor all unimparted thy gear. Perhaps stern of brow to thy tenantry thou, to leanness their countenances grew, 'gainst their crave for respite, when thy clamour for right required to a moment its due. While the frown of thy pride to the aged denied to cover their head from the chill, and humbly they stand with their bonnet in hand, as cold blows the blast of the hill. Thy serfs may look on, unheeding thy frown, thy rents and thy mailings unpaid, all praise to the stroke their bondage that broke, while but claims their obeisance the dead. Or a head do I clutch, whose devices were such that death must have lent them his sting, so daring they were, so reckless of fear, as heaven had wanted a king? Did the tongue of the lie, while it couched like a spy, in the haunt of thy venomous jaws, its slander display as poisons its prey, the devilish snake in the grass. That member unchained by strong bands is restrained, the inflexible shackles of death, and its emblem, the trail of the worm, shall prevail, where its slaver once harboured beneath. And oh, if thy scorn went down to thine urn, and expired with impenitent groan, to repose where thou art is of peace all thy part, and then to appear at the throne, like a frog from the lake that leapeth to take to the judge of thy actions the way, and to hear from his lips, amid nature's eclipse, thy sentence of termless dismay. The hardness of iron thy bones shall environ, to brass links the veins of thy frame shall stiffen, and the glow of thy manhood shall grow, like the anvil that melts not in flame. But wert thou the mould of a champion bold, for God and his truth and his law? Oh, then, though the fence of each limb and each sense is broken, each gem with a flaw, be comforted thou, for rising in air, thy flight shall the clarion obey, and the shell of thy dust thou shalt leave to be crushed, if they will, by the creatures of prey. Ambruadr, the Dream. We submit these further illustrations of the moral maxims of The Skull. In the original they are touched in phraseology scarcely unworthy of the poet's Saxon models. As Locke fasted in slumber's arms, I lay and dreamed, so dreams our race, when every spectral object charms to melt like shadow in the chase. A vision came, mine ear confessed its solemn sounds. Thou man distraught, say, owns the wind thy hand's arrest, or fills the world thy crave of thought? Since fell transgression ravaged here, and reft man's garden joys away, he weeps his unavailing tear, and straggles like a lamb astray. With trilling bleat for comfort high, to every pinfold humankind, ah, there the fostering teat is dry, the stranger mother proves unkind. No rest for toil, no drink for drought, for bosom peace the shadow's wing, so feeds expectancy on nought, and suckles every lying thing. Some woe for ever wreathes its chain, and hope foretells the clasp undone. Relief at handbreadth seems in vain, thy fettered arms embrace, 'tis gone. Not all that trial's lore unlearns, of all the lies that life betrays, avails, for still desire returns, the last day's folly is today's. Thy wish has prospered, has its taste survived the hour its lust was drowned, or yields thine expectation's zest to full fruition, golden crowned? The rosebud is life's symbol bloom, 'tis loved, 'tis coveted, 'tis riven, its grace, its fragrance find a tomb, when to the grasping hand 'tis given. Go, search the world, wherever woe of high or low the bosom rings, there gasp for gasp, and throe for throe, is answered from the breast of kings. From every heath turf reeks its cloud, from every heart its sigh is rolled. The rose's stalk is fanged, one shroud is both the sting's and honey's fold. Is wealth thy lust? Does envy pine, where high its tempting heaps are piled? Look down, behold the fountain shine, and deeper still with dregs defiled. Quickens thy breath with rash inhale, and falls an insect in its toil. The creature turns thy life blood pale, and blends thine ivory teeth with soil. When high thy fellow mortal soars, his state is like the topmost nest. It swings with every blast that roars, and every motion shakes its crest. And if the world for once is kind, yet ever has the lot its bend. Where fortune has the crook inclined, not all thy strength or art shall mend. For as the sapling's sturdy stalk, whose double twist is crossly strained, such is thy fortune, sure to balk at this extreme what there was gained. When heaven its gracious manna hailed, 'twas vain who hoarded its supply, not all his miser care availed his neighbour's portion to outvie. So blended all that nature owns, so warped all hopes that mortals bless, with boundless wealth the sufferer's groans, with courtly luxury distress. Lift up the balance, heap with gold, its other shell vile dust shall fill, and were a kingdom's ransom told, the scales would want adjustment still. Life has its competence, nor deem that better than enough were more. Sure it were fantasy to dream, with burdens to assuage thy sore. It is the fancy's whirling strife that breeds thy pain, today it craves, tomorrow spurns, suffices life, when passion asks what passion braves. Should appetite her wish achieve, to herd with brutes her joy would bound, pleased other paradise to leave, content to pasture on the ground. But pride rebels, nor towers alone beyond that confine's lowly sphere, seems as from the eternal throne it aimed the sceptre's self to tear. 'Tis thus we trifle, thus we dare, but seek we to our bliss the way, let us to heaven our path refer, believe, and worship, and obey. That choice is all to range beyond, nor must, nor needs, provision, grace, in these he gives who sits enthroned, salvation, competence, and peace. The instructive vision passed away, but not its wisdom's dreamless lore. No more in shadow tracks I stray, and fondle shadow shapes no more. Duncan Macintyre. Duncan Macintyre, Donnacha Ban, is considered by his countrymen the most extraordinary genius that the Highlands in modern times have produced. Without having learned a letter of any alphabet, he was able to pour forth melodies that charmed every ear to which they were intelligible, and he is understood to have had the published specimens of his poetry committed to writing by no mean judge of their merit, the late Dr. Stewart of Luss, who, when a young man, became acquainted with this extraordinary person, in consequence of his being employed as a kind of underkeeper in a forest adjoining to the parish of which the doctor's father was minister. Macintyre was born in Drumleart of Glenorchy on the 20th of March 1724, and died in October 1812. He was chiefly employed in the capacity of keeper in several of the Earl of Breadalbane's forests. He carried a musket, however, in his lordship's fencibles, which led him to take part, much against his inclination, in the Whig ranks at the Battle of Falkirk. Later in life he transferred his musket to the Edinburgh City Guard. Macintyre's best compositions are those which are descriptive of forest scenes, and those which he dedicated to the praise of his wife. His verses are, however, very numerous, and embrace a vast variety of subjects. From the extraordinary diffusiveness of his descriptions, and the boundless luxuriance of his expressions, much difficulty has been experienced in reproducing his strains in the English idiom. Mary Van Og, Mary the Young, the Fair-haired. My young, my fair-haired Mary, my lifetime love, my own, the vows I heard when my kindest dearie was bound to me alone, by covenant true and ritual holy, gave happiness all but divine, nor needed there more to transport me wholly than the friends that hailed thee mine. 'Twas a Monday morn, and the way that parted was far, but I rivalled the wind, the troth to plight with a maiden true-hearted, that force can never unbind. I led her apart in the hour that we reckoned, while I gained a love and a bride. I heard my heart, and could tell each second, as its pulses struck on my side. I told my ail to the foe that pained me, and said that no salve could save. She heard the tale, and her leechcraft it sained me, for herself to my breast she gave. For ever, my dear, I'll dearly adore thee, for chasing away, away, my fancy's delusion, new love's ever choosing, and teaching no more to stray. I roamed in the wood, many a tendril surveying, all shapely from branch to stem, my eye, as it looked, its ambition betraying, to cull the fairest from them. One branch of perfume, and blossom all over, bent lowly down to my hand, and yielded its bloom that hung high from each lover, to me, the least of the band. I went to the river, one net cast I threw in, where the stream's transparence ran. Forget shall I never how the beauty I drew in shone bright as the gloss of the swan. Oh, happy the day that crowned my affection with such a prize to my share! My love is a ray, a morning reflection, beside me she sleeps, a star. Bendurin, the Otter Mount. Bendurin is a forest scene in the wilds of Glenorchy. The poem or lay is descriptive less of the forest or its mountain fastness than of the habits of the creatures that tenant the locality, the dun deer and the roe. So minutely enthusiastic is the hunter's treatment of his theme, that the attempt to win any favour for his performance from the Saxon reader is attended with no small risk, although it is possible that a little practice with the rifle in any similar wilderness may propitiate even the holiday sportsman somewhat in favour of the subject and its minute details. We must commit this forest minstrel to the good nature of other readers, entreating them only to render due acknowledgment to the forbearance which has, in the meantime, troubled them only with the first half of the performance, and with a single stanza of the finale. The composition is always rehearsed or sung to pipe music, of which it is considered, by those who understand the original, a most extraordinary echo, besides being in other respects a very powerful specimen of Gaelic minstrelsy. Urlur. The noble Otter Hill, it is a chieftain bane, ever the fairest still of all these eyes have seen. Spacious is his side, I love to range where hide, in haunts by few espied, the nurslings of his den. In the bosky shade of the velvet glade, couch in softness laid the nimble-footed deer, to see the spotted pack, that in scenting never slack, coursing on their track, is the prime of cheer. Merry may the stag be, the lad that so fairly flourishes the russet coat that fits him so rarely. 'Tis a mantle whose wear time shall not tear, 'tis a banner that ne'er sees its colours depart. And when they seek his doom, let a man of action come, a hunter in his bloom, with rifle not untried, a notch firm fastened flint, to strike a trusty dint, and make the gunlock glint with a flash of pride. Let the barrel be but true, and the stock be trusty too, so Lightfoot, though he flew, shall be purple dyed. He should not be novice bred, but a marksman of first head, by whom that stag is sped in hillcraft not unskilled. So when Patrick of the glen called his hounds and men, the hill spake back again, and his orders shrilled. Then was firing snell, and the bullets rained like hail, and the red deer fell, like warrior on the field. Shule. Oh, the young doe so frisky, so coy and so fair, that gambols so briskly, and snuffs up the air, and hurries retiring to the rocks that environ, when foemen are firing, and bullets are there. Though swift in her racing, like the kinfolk before her, no heart burst unbracing, her strength rushes o'er her. 'Tis exquisite hearing her murmur as nearing, her mate comes careering, her pride in her lover. He comes, and her breathing her rapture is telling, how his antlers are wreathing, his white haunch how swelling. High chief of Bendoran, he seems as adoring, his hind he comes roaring to visit her dwelling. 'Twere endless my singing, how the mountain is teeming with thousands, that bringing each high chief's proud seeming, with his hind and her gala of younglings that follow, o'er mountains and Beala, all lightsome and beaming. When that Lightfoot so airy her race is pursuing, oh, what a vision saw e'er a feat of flight like her doing! She springs in the spreading grass, scarce feels her treading. It were fleet foot that sped in, twice the time that she flew in, the gallant array. How the marshes they spurn, in the frisk of their play, and the wheelings they turn, as the cloud of the mind they would distance behind, and give years to the wind, in the pride of their scorn. 'Tis the marrow of health in the forest to lie, where nooking in stealth they enjoy her supply, her fosterage breeding, a race never needing save the milk of her feeding from a breast never dry. Her hill grass they suckle, her mammets they swill, and in wantonness chuckle o'er tempest and chill. With their ankles so light, and their girdles of white, and their bodies so bright with the drink of the rill. Through the grassy glen sporting, in murmurless glee, nor snowdrift nor fortune shall urge them to flee, save to seek their repose in the clefts of the nose, and the depths of the howes, of their own S and T. Urlár. In the forest den the deer makes as best befits his lair, where is plenty and to spare of her grassy feast. There she browses free on the herbage of the lea, or marsh grass daintily, until her haunch is greased. Her drink is of the well, where the watercresses swell, nor with the flowing shell is the toper better pleased. The bent makes nobler cheer, or the rashes of the mere, than all the craig that e'er gave surfeit to a guest. Come, see her table spread, the sorach sweet displayed, the ailvie, and the head of the daisy stem, the dorach crested sleek, and ringed with many a streak, presents her pastures meek, profusely by the stream. Such the luxuries that plump their noble size, and the herd entice to revel in the howes. Nobler haunches never sat on pride of Greece than when they batten on the forest links and fatten on the herbs of their carouse. Oh, 'tis pleasant in the gloaming, when the supper time calls in their hosts from roaming to see their social prime, and when the shadows gather, they lair on native heather, nor shelter from the weather need but the knolls behind. Dread or dark is none, theirs the mountain throne, height and slope their own, the gentle mountain kind. Pleasant is the grace of their hue and dappled dress, and an ark in their distress in Bendoran dear they find. Siúil. So brilliant thy hue, with tendril and floweret, the grace of the view, what land can o'erpower it? Thou mountain of beauty, methinks it might suit thee, the homage of beauty to claim as a queen. What needs it, adoring thy reign, we see pouring the wealth of their store in already, I ween. The season scarce rolled once, their gifts are twice told, and the months they unfold on thy bosom their dower, with profusion so rare, ne'er was clothing so fair, nor was jewelling e'er like the bud and the flower of the groves on thy breast, where rejoices to rest his magnificent crest, the mountain cock shrilling in quick time his note, and the clans of the groat with melody's note their tumblers are trilling. No foot can compare in the dance of the green with the roebuck's young heir, and here he is seen, with his deftness of speed, and his sureness of tread, and his bend of the head, and his freedom of spring. Over corrie careers he, the wood cover clears he, and merrily steers he with bound and with fling, as he spurns from his stern the heather and fern, and dives in the dern of the wilderness deep. Or anon, with a strain and a twang of each vein, he revels amain mid the cliffs of the steep, with the burst of a start, when the flame of his heart impels to depart, how he distances all, 2 bounds and a leap, the brown hillocks to sweep, his appointment to keep with the doe at her call. With her following, the roe, from the danger of ken, crouches inly and low in the haunts of the glen, ever watchful to hear, ever active to peer, ever deft to career, all ear, vision, and limb. And though Colt and Cuchulainn with the horses and following should rush to her dwelling, and our prince in his trim, they might vainly aspire, without rifle and fire, to ruffle or nigh her mantle to dim. Stark-footed, lively, ever capering naively, with motion alive, eye, and wax white in shine. When her startle betrays that the hounds are in chase, the same as the base is the rocky decline. She puffs from her chest, and she ambles her crest, and disdain is expressed in her nostril and eye. That eye, how it winks! Like a sunbeam it blinks, and it glows and it sinks, and is jealous and shy. A mountaineer lynx, like her race that's gone by. Crunluath, Finale. Her lodge is in the valley here, no huntsman void of notion should hurry on the fallow deer, but steal on her with caution. With wary step and watchfulness, to stalk her to the resting place ensures the gallant wight's success before she is in motion. The hunter bold should follow then, by bog and rock and hollow then, and nestle in the gully then, and watch with deep devotion the shadows on the benty grass, and how they come and how they pass, nor must he stir with gesture rash to quicken her emotion. With nerve and eye so wary, sir, that straight his piece may carry, sir, he marks with care the quarry, sir, the muzzle to repose on. And now the knuckle is applied, the flint is struck, the priming tried, is fired, the volley has replied, and reeks in high commotion. Was better powder ne'er to flint, nor trustier wadding of the lint, and so we strike a telling dint. Well done, my own Nicaution. End of section 18. Recording by Chairlie, BC, Canada. Section 19 of the Modern Scottish Minstrel. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Chairlie. The Modern Scottish Minstrel by Charles Rogers. Section 19. The Bard to his Musket. MacIntyre acted latterly as a constable of the City Guard of Edinburgh, in station procured him by the Earl of Breadalbane, at his own special request, that benevolent nobleman having inquired of the Bard what he could do for him, to render him independent in his now advanced years. His salary as a peace officer was 6d. a day, but the poet was so abundantly satisfied with the attainment of his position and endowments, that he gave expression to his feelings of satisfaction in a piece of minstrelsy, which in the original ranks among his best productions. Of this ode we are enabled to present a faithful metrical translation, quite in the spirit of the original, as far as conversion of the Gaelic into the Scottish idiom is practicable. The version was kindly undertaken at our request by Mr. William Sinclair, the ingenious author of Poems of the Fancy and the Affections, who has appropriately adapted it to the lively tune Alistair McAllister. The song, remarks Mr. Sinclair, is much in the spirit, though in a more humorous strain, of the famous sword song, beginning in the translation, Come forth, my glittering bride, composed by Theodore Körner of Dresden, and the last and most remarkable of his patriotic productions, wherein the soldier addresses his sword as his bride, thereby giving expression to the most glowing sentiments of patriotism. MacIntyre addresses as his wife the musket which he carried as an officer of the guard, and is certainly as enthusiastic in praise of his new acquisition as ever was lovesick swain in eulogy of the most attractive fair one. Oh, mony a turn of woe and weal may happen to a Highland man. Though he fall in love, he soon may feel he cannot get the fancied one. The first I loved in time that's past, I courted 20 years agone, but she forsook me at the last, and Duncan then was left alone. To Edinburgh I forthwith hied, to seek a sweetheart to my mind, and, if I could, to find a bride, for the false love I left behind. Said Captain Campbell of the Guard, I ken a widow secretly, and I'll try, as she's no that ill for'd, to put her, Duncan, in your way. As I was wont, I trow, did he fulfil his welcome promise true. He gave the widow unto me, and all her portion with her too. And whosoe'er may ask her name, and her surname also may desire, they called her Janet, great her fame, and 'twas George who was her grandsire. She's quiet and affable and free, no vexing gloom or look on hand, as high in rank and in degree as any lady in the land. She's my support and my relief, since e'er she joined me anyhow, Great is the cureless cause of grief to him who has not got her now. Nae caution, I've forsaken quite, although she liveth still at ease, and allow the crested stags to fight, and wander wheresoe'er they please. A young wife I have chosen now, which I repent not anywhere. I am not wanting wealth, I trow, since ever I espoused the fair. I pass my word of honour bright, most excellent I do her call. In her I ne'er in any light discovered any fault at all. She's stately, fine, and straight and sound, without a hidden fault, my friend. In her defect I never found, nor yet a blemish, twist, or bend. When needy folk are pinched, alas, for money in great degree, ah, George's daughter, generous lass, ne'er lets my pockets empty be. She keepeth me in drink, and stays by me in alehouses and all, and at once without a word she pays for every stoop I choose to call. And every turn I bid her do, she does it with a willing grace. She never tells me aught untrue, nor story false with lying face. She keeps my rising family as well as I could e'er desire, although no labour I do try, nor dirty work for love or hire. I laboured once laboriously, although no riches I amassed. A menial I disdain to be, and keep my vow until the last. I have ceased to labour in the lan, since e'er I noticed to my wife, that the idle and contented man endureth to the longest life. 'Tis my musket, loving wife indeed, in whom I faithfully believe. She's able still to earn my bread, and Duncan she will ne'er deceive. I'll have no lack of linens fair, and plenty clothes to serve my turn, and trust me that all worldly care now gives me not the least concern. John Macodrum. John Macodrum, the Bard of Uist, was patronised by an eminent judge of merit, Sir James Macdonald of Skye, of whom, after a distinguished career at Oxford, such expectations were formed, that on his premature death at Rome he was lamented as the Marcellus of Scotland. Macodrum's name is cited in the Ossianic controversy upon Sir James's report, as a person whose mind was stored with Ossianic poetry, of which Macpherson gave to the world the far-famed Specimens. A humorous story is told of Macodrum, who was a noted humourist, having trifled a little with the translator when he applied for a sample of the old Fingalian in the words, "Hast thou got anything of or on," equivalent in Gaelic to "Hast thou anything to get of," the Fingalian heroes. "If I have," quoth Macodrum, "I fear it is now irrecoverable." Macodrum, whose real patronymic is understood to have been Macdonald, lived to lament his patron in elegiac strains, a fact that brings the time in which he flourished down to 1766. His poem, entitled Song of Age, is admired by his countrymen for its rapid succession of images, a little too mixed or abrupt on some occasions, its descriptive power, and its neatness and flow of versification. Oran na Huish, the Song of Age. Should my numbers essay to enliven a lay, the notes would betray the languor of woe. My heart is o'erthrown, like the rush of the stone that unfixed from its throne seeks the valley below. The veteran of war, that knows not to spare, and offers us ne'er the respite of peace, resistless comes on, and we yield with a groan, for under the sun is no hope of release. 'Tis a sadness, I ween, how the glow and the sheen of the rosiest mien from their glory subside. How hurries the hour on our race that shall lower the arm of our power and the step of our pride. As scatter and fail, on the wing of the gale, the mist of the vale and the cloud of the sky, so dissolving our bliss, comes the hour of distress, old age with that face of aversion to joy. Oh, heavy of head, and silent as lead, and unbreathed as the dead is the person of age. Not a joint, not a nerve, so prostrate their verve, in the contest shall serve, or the feat to engage. To leap with the best, or the billow to breast, or the race prize to rest, were but effort in vain. On the message of death pours an Egypt of wrath, the fever's hot breath, the dart shot of pain. Ah, desolate eld, the wretch that is held by thy grapple must yield thee his dearest supplies. The friends of our love at thy call must remove what boots how they strove from thy bands to arise. They leave us, deplore, as it wills us, our store, our strength at the core, and our vigour of mind. Remembrance forsakes us, distraction o'ertakes us, every love that awakes us, we leave it behind. Thou spoiler of grace, that changest the face, to hasten its race on the route to the tomb, to whom nothing is dear, unaffectioned the ear, emotion is sere, and expression is dumb. Of spirit how void, thy passions how cloyed, thy pith how destroyed, and thy pleasure how gone! To the pang of thy cries not an echo replies, even sympathy dies, and thy helper is none. We see thee, how stripped of each bloom that equipped thy flourish, till nipped by the winter thy rose, till the spoiler made bare the scalp of the hair, and the ivory tear from its sockets repose. Thy skinny, thy cold, thy visageless mould, its disgust is untold, and its surface is dim. What a signal of wrack is the wrinkle's dull track, and the bend of the back, and the limp of the limb! Thou leper of fear, thou niggard of cheer, where glory is dear, shall thy welcome be found? Thou contempt of the brave, or rather the grave, than to pine as the slave that thy fetters have bound. Like the dusk of the day is thy colour of grey, thou foe of the lay, and thou phantom of gloom, thou bane of delight, when thy shivering plight, and thy grizzle of white, and thy crippleness come, to beg at the door. Ah, woe for the poor, and the greeting unsure that grudges their bread! All unwelcome they call, from the hut to the hall, the confession of all is, "'tis time he were dead." The picturesque portion of the description here terminates. With respect to the moral and religious application, it is but just to the poet to say, that before the close he appeals in pathetic terms to the young, warning them not to boast of their strength, or to abuse it, and that he concludes his lay with the sentiment that whatever may be the ills of age, there are worse that await an unrepenting death, and a suffering eternity. Norman MacLeod, or Toramach Ban. Single speech Hamilton may be said to have had his marrow in a Highland bard, nearly his contemporary, whose one effort was attended with more lasting popularity than the sole oration of that celebrated person. The clan song of the Mackenzies is the composition in question, and its author is now ascertained to have been a gentleman, or farmer of the better class, of the name of Norman MacLeod, a native of Assynt in Sutherland. The most memorable particular known of this person, besides the production of his poetic effort, is his having been the father of a Glasgow professor, whom we remember occupying the chair of church history in the university in very advanced age, about 1814, assisted by a helper and successor, and of another son, who was the respected minister of ROGERS till towards the end of last century. The date of Caberfae is not ascertained. It was composed during the exile of Lord Seaforth, but we imagine before the '45, in which he did not take part, and while Macshimei, Lord Lovat, still passed for a Whig. In Mackenzie's excellent collection, page 361, a later date is assigned to the production. The Seaforth tenantry, who, after the manner of the clans, privately supported their chief in his exile, appear to have been much aggrieved by some proceedings of the loyalist Monroe of Foulis, who, along with his neighbour of Culloden and Lovat, were probably acting under government commission, in which the interests of the crown were seconded by personal or family antagonism. The loyal family of Sutherland, who seem by grant or lease to have had an interest in the estates, also come in for a share of the bard's resentment. All this forms the subject of Caberfae, which, without having much meaning or poetry, served, like the celebrated Lillibulero, to animate armies, and inflame party spirit to a degree that can scarcely be imagined. The repetition of "the staghead when rises his caber on," which concludes every strophe, is enough at any time to bring a Mackenzie to his feet, or into the forefront of battle, being a simple allusion to the Mackenzie crest, allegorised into an emblem of the stag at bay, or ready in his ire to push at his assailant. The caber is the horn, or rather the tine of the fist head, no ignoble emblem, certainly, of clannish fury and impetuosity. The difficulty of the measure compels us to the use of certain metrical freedoms, and also of some Gaelic words, for which is craved the reader's indulgence. Caber Fé, the Staghead. A health to Caber Fé, a toast and a cheery one, that soon return he may, though long and far his tarrying, the death of shame befall me, be riven off my agey too. But my fancy hears thy call, we should be up and ready, yo! 'Tis I have seen thy weapon keen, thine arm in action scorning, assign their dues to the Munros, their welcome in the morning. Nor stood the catach to his bratach, for dread of a belabouring, when up gets the staghead, and raises his caber on. Woe to the man of foolish, when he to fight must challenge thee, nor better fared the roses, that lent Munro their valiancy. The Groundhach and the Fraser, they tarried not the melee in, fled Forbes in dismay, sir, Culloden wards undallying. Away they ran, while firm remain, not 1 to 3 retiring so. The Earl, the Craven, took to haven, scarce a pistol firing, oh! Mackay of spoils his heart recoils, he cries in haste his cabal on, he flies, as soars the staghead, and raises his caber on. Like feather'd creatures flying, that in the hill mist shiver, in haste for refuge hieing, to the meadow or the river. So port they sought and took to boat, bewailing what had happened them. To trust was rash, the missing flash of the rusty guns that weaponed them. The coracle of many a skull, the relics of his neighbour on, Munro retreats, for Staghead is raising his caber on. I own my expectation, 'tis this has roused my apathy, that he who rules creation may change the dismal hap of thee, and hasten to restore thee, in safety from thy danger, to thine own in joy and glory, to save us from the stranger, with princely grace to give redress, nor a taunt to suffer back again. The fell Munro has felt thy blow, and should he dare attack again, then as he flew he'll run anew, the flames to quench he'll labour on, of castle fired, when Staghead high raises his caber on. I've seen thee o'er the lowly, a gracious chieftain ever, the Catach self below thee, and the Gaelic cowered for cover, but evermore they're striving, when claimed respect thine eye, to scourge corrected driving, to other lands to fly. Thy loyal crew of clansmen true, no panic fear shall turn them, with steel cap blade and skeen arrayed, their banning foes they spurn them. Clan Shimei then may dare them, they'll fly, had each a sabre on, needs but a look when Staghead once raises his caber on. Mounts not the wing a fouler thing than thy vaunted crest the eagle, oh, inglorious chief, to boast the thief that forays with the beagle, oh! For shame, preferred that ravening bird, my song shall raise the mountain deer, the prey he scorns, the carcass spurns, he loves the crest, the fountain cheer. His lodge is in the forest, while carrion flesh enticing, thy greedy maw thou buryest, thou kite of prey, thy claws in, the putrid corse of famished horse, the greedy hound a striving, to rival thee in gluttony, both at the bowels riving. Thou called the true bird, never, thou foster child of evil, ha! How ill match with thy feather the talons of thy devilry! But when thy foray preys on our harmless flocks so dastardly, how often has the shepherd with trusty baton mastered thee? Well in thy fright hast timed thy flight, else not alone belabouring, he'd gored thee with the staghead, upraising his caber on. Woe worth the world deceiver, so false, so fair of seeming, We've seen the noble Seafort, with all his war notes screaming, when not a chief in Alpin, Macallan's self though backing him, could face his frown, as Staghead arose with his cabar on. To join thy might when called the right, a gallant army springing on, would rise from Assynt to the crags of Scalpa, rescue bringing on. Each man upon true flinted gun, steel glaive and trusty Dacachan, with the island lord of Sleiche, when uprose thy cabar on. Came too the men of Mujart, while streamed their flag its bravery, their gleaming weapons blue dyed, that havocked on the cavalry. McAllister, Mackinnon, with many a flashing trigger there, the foemen rushing in on, resistless showed their vigour there. May fortune free thee, may we see thee again in Brown the turreted, girt with thy clan, and not a man but will get the scorn he merited. Then wine will play, and usquebae from flagons and from battalan, and pipers scream when Staghead high raises his cabar on. End of Volume 1. End of Section 19. Recording by Chairlie. And if you got this far, congratulations, and always remember, Chaharv Truas a Chur Cat. End of The Modern Scottish Minstrel, Volume 1, by Charles Rogers.